you tired of the daily hustle and bustle, the endless traffic just to get your little one to a good school? GMS Snap Bingo offers a unique blend of academic excellence with a holistic child development in both nursery and primary. We provide a national curriculum with an international touch. Enroll your child today by visiting our campus along Trinity College, Dabigo Road. GMS Snap Bingo, where every child's potential is a reality. Because we care.
Hello and welcome. This is Second Take with IDK Isma Dakawa Chigongo. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for liking. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for commenting. My name is Mebo Kevirunji. Glad you could join us this long Easter weekend. Isma, How are you today?
I'm very good, as always. Alhamdulillah. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon. Okay. Wherever you're watching.
Yeah, we have a wonderful audience online. Isma, we got some sad news yesterday about the demise, I don't know if that's a good word, but about the death or the passing on of Allan Sekamatte, who I would like to believe is the generation you followed. I know you could have worked together, but those were the people, I think for me, the first people I started watching. Okay, maybe the second lot after that gentleman from UBC, whose name I can't remember.
Andrew Patrick Lowanda.
Yes, he was the first. And then the next generation was, of course, Allan Sekamatte, Mark Sally, the late Kenneth Matovu, and Joseph Kabuleta.
Yeah.
There were four, I remember. And I don't know where Aldrin was at that point. He was somewhere, but he wasn't among those four. And we watched, and I can remember them on WBS, I can remember them on radio. But how would you like to remember Allan Sekamatte?
You've hit the nail in the head. I was very glad to have shared space with him because when I joined Daily Monitor, he was one of the editors there. As a young boy, as I started my internship. So we shared space, a lot of conversation, a lot of things. During my early years in the newsroom. One of the first things I'd love to remember about Allan was how much and how easily he used this Queen's language to communicate, both with a keyboard and then later on, or earlier on with a microphone. That's the first thing that comes to mind. The way life goes, in the last few years I've been Allan Sekamatte's supervisor because my daytime job, I am head of sports of Nation Media Group, which is the platforms that include NTV, Daily Monitor, Spark TV, Dembe FM and KFM. So Allan continued to be a columnist whose content I was always obliged to run, and largely in his later years it was predictions. But once in a while when he wasn't predicting on games, he always wrote a column whose title was From the Dugout. Very interesting, the manner in which he put his ideas out. Very daring too. I remember he wrote some headlines that all of us in the newsroom would always either contest or could not fathom that they would pass the bare minimum of journalism principles. But he always pushed the envelope that much. But for some of a generation who would not know who Allan Sekamatte was, I remember first seeing him, I think, on television back in 2001 on WBS. And like you mentioned, the show was called Spot On. Every Sunday night from 10 p.m. to about 11:30 p.m. At the time, there wasn't a lot of TV sports punditry. So you could say they were among the pioneers. Actually, Allan had joined the show following the demise of Kenneth Andrew Matovu, who died actually, I was reading last night, on August 28th, 2001, somewhere on the Kampala Jinja Highway in Lugazi. So when Kenneth Andrew Matovu died, the show needed a third person, and it used to have Mark Sully, and Joseph Kableta. So Allan came in as a replacement for Kenneth Andrew Matovu. That is nearly 25 years ago. So they continued to do the show for a very long time until WBS folded. And then they moved to NBS, the entire crew, the three of them. They did a show, I think, that was called Home and Away, partly engineered by Joe Chigozi. And thereafter, he actually went a bit quiet from the media. He continued to work because he left Daily Monitor at the time. Because like I stated, when I joined Daily Monitor, while Willis, a university student, back in December 2007, Allan was the deputy sports editor, because at the time, Mark Namanya was our editor, and a few months earlier, Mark Sully had been the editor before there were changes. So at some point, he quit Daily Monitor and joined Reza. It was a newspaper that eventually did not last very long. He had also worked at a publication called PML Daily, which he joined. I think PML Daily must still exist, started by Alex Atohaire, former news editor at Daily Monitor. Then eventually after that, I think he's gone quiet over the past few years. For those who still use their social media, I think he has used a lot of his Facebook to air out some of his personal and private challenges over the past few years. Fortunately, I'm a law-abiding citizen, so when government shut down Facebook, I haven't visited
in Uganda, for context.
Uganda, yeah, I haven't visited Facebook, and I don't know what happens on Facebook at all, unless I sit on someone's phone or computer or laptop. So he used that platform to air out a lot of his grievances, most of them very private, very intimate, but also showed a lot of the weakness that I think we have as human beings, because maybe I wouldn't, but he chose that way. So while he did that, he contacted me when I was appointed head of sports in November 2020 at Nation Media Group, largely the media house where I've spent a large portion of my adult life. And I could not write a story about the things I've done or not done in life and not mention NMG in the first or second sentence. So when I took the job in November 2020, Allan was one of the first people to congratulate me, one, and also request that he wanted to resume writing. And I told him I have no issues with him. So he's someone who had been my supervisor, and here I was seeking my endorsement to be his supervisor. So in early 2021, we reached an agreement, and he was able to write. His contract was processed, and he got back to writing. And he was able to do that Saturday Monitor opinion until last year. So at the end of last season, we joke about so many things that he got right or he got wrong. Then when the season resumed, which was 2024-25, that was the last time he was writing. When the season resumed, that's ongoing, 2025-2026. I sought him out to write again because the season was starting, and he did not. So because we are very, very poor communicators, when such a message comes through, I think it took me maybe 2 to 3 months to respond, to resume the conversation. So the last time we had a conversation in actual sense was in December. So I sent him a message and asked him how he was doing, and I asked him, did you quit actually? How come you no longer write? Then he told me, actually, I could read the actual message, because when I read it again last night, I was thinking maybe I should have followed up much more than I did at that point. So I sent him a message and asking him, did you actually quit because you haven't written? Then he responded and said, no. Apparently, I've been admitted at doctor's clinic in Seguku. But
he used the word apparently.
Yeah, he used the word apparently. That is how Allan was, yeah, because he wasn't in good health, but he wasn't seeking a lot of pity from many of us that he knew. So earlier this week, Maxali, who had been close and spent a lot of years with Allan Sekamatte as a colleague and friend, sends journalists a message in one of the forums, which is the Uganda Sports Press Association WhatsApp group. And he said, Allan is in very, very poor health at Chirudu. He has a heart condition. Pray for him, but he used the word critical. He's in a very critical state. So we all jump out of our ventilators, or kamoli like it's called, and make a comment and say a prayer. So in the aftermath of that, I promised myself that before the end of this week, which is Easter week, and I was hoping that on Thursday, that actually make my way to Chirudu to check on him. Then on Wednesday night, Maxali sends a message that Allan Sekamatte had actually passed on, bring an end to the life of someone that many of us in a generation enjoy to watch. Some of us were very lucky to share a desk with him, a newsroom, a space with him consistently for the years when he was a Daily Monitor. Some of us in my situation, I was also very lucky not only to work alongside him, but also to be his supervisor in that sense. So,
and would you pass those borderline headings? Or he had toned down by that time?
He had toned down considerably. But I would also amend one of my jobs as an editor on every single day is to come up with at least 7 to 8 headlines that are not repeated, that I haven't used before. So I think I've mastered that. You master that with territory. Some of it is a lot of lessons, but I've also been very, very lucky in my time in journalism. I've worked with some of the most brilliant sports journalists in this country in the same newsroom. When I mention Mark Namanya and Mark Sally, I cannot look beyond those. But I was also, over the years, while I've not shared a newsroom with Joseph Kableta, I've shared so many intimate conversations about journalism with him. And I've always told him, I think he's one of the best writers of his generation. And I've also been very lucky that these gentlemen that people discuss and talk about, having made them fall in love with sports analysis and all, have also given me a lot of praise and flowers, in their own way. They come back and say, you're doing a very good job. I remember many years ago, I think it was Joseph Kableta who was missing from one of the shows, should have been at 10BS Home and Away. So when Maxali and Allan looked around for a third person to be on the show with them, they called me on a Sunday evening. They didn't even know how excited I was that I was going to be on the same show with them. So in the aftermath of doing the show, Allan, I think Maxali does not, if you know him and I've interacted with him, I know a bit of his family, and I'm lucky to call him friend. We have a lot of conversation almost every 48 hours about many things. He loves to chew on his emotions. You won't know. If he wants to tell you you're very good, he'll probably say you're better than something and uses something bad. That's how he communicates. So when I walked out of studio that night, Allan Sekamatte actually told me something, that you're actually very argumentative. You're very good for TV. Yeah? You're very good for an argument. And that stayed with me. But you have to look back to all those years when Ugandan sports journalism was transformed not only by the writers who eventually became columnists, the Maxalis, the Joseph Kabletas, Allan Sekamatte, and the others, but also radio and television.
Yeah.
If you go back to when NMG, by then Monitor Publications, started Monitor FM, and they started a sports show called Scoreline, which was the first daily sports show, 6 to 7 p.m. The presenters who did that show were Maxali and Allan Sekamatte. Of course, there had been shows because the locker room had started earlier.
Yeah.
The locker room with Radio 1 had started in 1997. And this was a once a week. Or CBS2 had started Kati Mizanyo and a few others, Simba and a few others. But that Scoreline on Monitor FM became almost an encyclopedia. I remember tuning into radio back then, and Monitor FM, that later on became KFM, was a radio that you tuned in from around 6 to 8 p.m. because you had to listen to Scoreline 6 to 7. And then there was Andrew Mwenda live from 7 to 8, which was also a must listen back in the day. So that transformation, when we see this 24-hour sports analysis and all these channels with digital content and television and radio, there was a time when they weren't, but there are people who made them worthwhile. And Allan Sekamatte was part of that generation that did. May his soul rest in eternal peace. Very unfortunate, I think he's gone quietly, because I've seen even people have made comments that they've not interacted or seen him in his latter years. It reminds me of a thing we've always talked about, the morning after.
The morning after, yeah.
That Joseph Kableta wrote, that opinion from 2004, that I think I can forget so many things. I could forget my name and not forget that column, written in the aftermath of the passing of one of the greatest footballers Uganda has ever seen, Paul Hasule, the former SC Villa captain, 8-time league champion. So that is how I would describe the life and times of Allan Sekamatte. I'm very, very glad I could say we shared space with him, and we shared a lot of conversation. We spent nights out with him in my younger days, and that always meant I didn't have to worry about my bill, which of course was my soda bill, or even my transport home. When he used to drive an Ipsam back in the day when I first interacted with him back in 2007. And his latter days have been very difficult on a very personal level. Many of us have known. They've been very, very difficult. Maybe not the best way, but in the end, it's God who knows. Allan Sekamatte, may your soul rest in eternal peace.
Indeed, may his soul rest in eternal peace. Isma, we spoke earlier in the week, but I'm sure you have some more news about AFCON. What's happening? What's the latest from the corridors that you're hearing?
One of the heartwarming things about the Africa Cup of Nations is that, first of all, it's a conversation that now exceeds sports pages and sports programs. And for me, that warms my heart. The other week, there was an NRM caucus meeting in Entebbe. And part of the budget priorities, because the budget for this financial year, 2026-2027, which starts on July 1st and ends on June 30th, 2027, one of those budget priorities where the first is always peace and security, AFCON 2027 is also in there, alongside the railway line that is being constructed from Balaba to Kampala. Should be in Kampala in 2 years, alongside road infrastructure and all these other things. AFCON 2027 is among the priorities of this government. That warms my heart. That's one way to look at it. Two, I saw the leader of opposition, Joel Senyonyi, on the floor of Parliament, tasking government on some of the what he described as substandard work that has been done at Hoima City Stadium, and the timelines for the work to be done at Nambole Stadium. And in there, he accuses government of spending 500 billion shillings without without completing the job. And in the budget, I think what is going to be spent on stadiums over the next period is an equivalent of 1.3 trillion shillings. So the conversation is no longer for sports programs. It's now on the floor, in the center, or in the floor of Parliament. So government had to give a response, and I saw the Prime Minister, Right Honourable Robin Anabanja, responding to that. Thirdly, we had a story about Kenya not paying the $30 million. They eventually did this week.
But before we go there, there's a discrepancy in how much has actually been used.
Yeah.
Did they account for the 500 billion?
The government, I wouldn't be an expert on the Auditor General's report,
because
but
the
we'd have
permanent
to wait.
secretary said something, and
no, that was a lot different, because the permanent secretary, Dr. Kedres Turiagenda, who I have actually met once. I met her in Morocco, and we shared a conversation for a very short period of time, gave a figure of how much would be spent on phase 2 construction of Nambole. I think that was a figure. Nambole. Yeah, then a few weeks later, the State Minister for Sports, Peter Ogwang, who has been in the firing line this week, came up with a different figure, and the discrepancy, I think, is in excess of 20 or 30 billion shillings. But you and I have lived long enough to know that this wouldn't be very new in terms of the figures. That's why normally I always want to wait and look at the Auditor General's report once these projects are done, and then you get to know actually what was missing, how much was budgeted, and how much was actually spent.
Okay. So we'll go back to Kenya.
So on the other side also, Kenya paid their 30 million, remember?
Obgalo.
Yeah. Each of the 3 countries is supposed to pay $30 million to make a sum $90 million. Kenya, Uganda and Tanzania had already paid, and Kenya has also met their part of the bargain. So it's now a full complement in terms of the fees required to host the AFCON. That is being done. Now, what is still happening here is that I've seen an exchange, and the two parties, largely the Minister of State for Sports on behalf of government, and FIFA, who let out someone who should not be speaking for them, in Patrick Intege, to respond to him. And I think at this stage, only the former president, I think, Moses Mago, should be speaking. It's a very, very critical thing and sensitive that only the head of the house should speak, not the children. So the Minister Guang goes out and makes a statement that actually FIFA were involved in all the planning and inspection and construction of Hoima City Stadium, and they would know everything to do with the standards that have been followed. And then a FIFA official, who is the national team's officer, Patrick Indege, comes out to deny and say FIFA were never involved. And there's been that exchange. And I've seen, in some of the video clips I've seen, in interviews that Ogwang gave UBC, the national broadcaster, I thought he sounded relatively angry. And he wasn't largely communicating. He was largely trying to score points. And that wouldn't be, for me, the way to go about it. I think we're a country, and I would borrow from my colleague Elvis, we're a country that has now come up with so many extreme opinions about things that if member says something and I don't agree to it, then we cannot sit down and find a point of convergence. However, when I look at the AFCON, I think we have an opportunity to come together, because this is not about the politics or anything. It's about a football tournament where Uganda gets to host Africa and the world. So I do not get at the point where everyone is trying to score on this kind of blame game. We should all be looking forward to doing our best. And I've liked that in many of the cases, let's take an example of Parliament. In many of the cases where budgets have been presented and the requirements are for the AFCON, or in the case of the reconstruction or the rehabilitation of Nambole, which cost as much as 97 billion, both government and opposition have spoken of, have drunk from the same cup. So I do not get it at this point where it's a case of either or. or neither nor. Yeah, for me, it's a case of all of us should be pulling in the same direction.
Yeah, it's a bit
So
strange.
it's a bit strange. And when I saw the Minister of State for Sports, Peter Ogwang, with whom we share WhatsApp conversations, I was taken aback. I did not understand where the anger was coming from. And I'm not saying this because he promised me goats. Yeah, because he's invited me to Hungarian to go and pick goats from his farm to start my own. And I've not
Can
been
I
able
come
to
along
drive.
with you?
I've not been able to drive to Hungarian yet. And he always reminds me to go there and pick my goats. But in the end, I do not understand why there is all this animosity. In the end, this is for Uganda.
Yeah.
This is not for NRM or PFF or FDC or NUP. In the end, when the AFCON is hosted, no one will care about what party hosted the AFCON. It's going to be about Uganda. When we fail, the discussion is going to be how poor Uganda was. And when we succeed, it's going to be about how good Uganda was in hosting the tournament. So we should be at a point where all these extreme opinions, I think, sink, and we let the collective rise in the end to have the tournament hosted successfully.
Okay, and talking about success, our neighbors, Congo, they even had a public holiday given in their honor of this historic milestone that they have achieved by qualifying, becoming the 10th team to represent Africa in Mexico, US, and Canada come June 2026.
Yeah, huge success, huge story. After 52 years, Congo, DRC are back at the AFCON. The last time they qualified, you'd have to explain to the younger generation that country was called Zaire. Or Zaire.
With Mobutu Sese Seko.
Yeah, under Mobutu Sese Seko. The father of kleptocracy, if you describe it as that. Whenever I think about Mobutu, I remember that day walking through the streets of Rabat and walking to a place where there's a cemetery, and I'd been told that's where he's buried. And yeah, I think about it and I'm like, okay, this guy is buried in Rabat, not even in Badolite, yeah, where he did all his great things. But the country for which he supported a lot of sport and even brought the Rambo in the jungle in the 1970s is back at the global stage because DRC beat Jamaica by 1-0.
They stopped reggae.
Yeah, they stopped reggae. They want to be reggae at the World Cup.
Lucky Dube sang, nobody can stop
But we'll
reggae.
have enough. We'll have enough. We'll have a lot of Lingala. Considering that actually this Easter there is even a Willow Longomba. I think he's performing somewhere in Gulu and in Imbarara. I wonder how he's going to move across the country. But anyway.
This guy needs to start applying for his visa, the Patrice Lumumba guy.
He was actually denied a visa.
So he needs to start for America now.
For that game in Mexico, because he had applied, and these days he has a bit of resources. He left Morocco anywhere in excess with 20,000 euros.
Wow.
Yeah, given by the Moroccan government for what?
The abuse.
For the abuse and for how much he promoted the tournament, because he became the story of the AFCON. But his country is going to the World Cup because they beat Jamaica by 1-0. A goal scored by Alex Tuanzebe, a player raised at Manchester United, played for England at under 21 level. Now he's elevated the DRC to the level of qualifying for the World Cup after 52 years. For me, it's also a testament of, one, countries that have been able to attract their players from the diaspora. Because Congo has a lot of these. When you think about Tuanzebe, when you think about Johan Visa, when you think about Chasel Mbemba and a few others, they've been able to attract a diaspora population. Most of them born to either Congolese parents or people with ancestry from DRC who have been attracted to come and play for the country. Then the other is the masterclass of Sebastian Dosabri, someone I've spoken about many times. During his time when he was Uganda Cranes coach, I got a chance to interact with him on multiple occasions. I always boast that I was the first Ugandan journalist to interview him when he first arrived. The FIFA head of corporate affairs now, or director of corporate affairs, who was communications director at the time, Ahmed Hussein, invited me to do an interview with him. He was wearing a grey suit and a black shirt. Within a few hours, driven from the airport, unveiled, and then we did the interview in a very old sofa. Eventually, we sat across the Sabri and I, and we maintained quite a very good relationship. Right now, we do not have the same kind of relation. I would imagine he has bonuses for taking the team to the World Cup, and that wouldn't hurt if we had a conversation about his bonuses. But big congratulations to him, and affirms how good a coach Dosabri is, that when he first came into Africa, all those many years ago, I think coaching in Burkina Faso, back in 2011 or 12, and this happens, I think, to everyone who comes to this continent. They grow so fond of it that they never go back home.
They never go back.
Yeah, he's gone back home before and coached a team in the French League 2, or French Liga 2, called Niort. But eventually, he couldn't find a home where he felt very comfortable, where he felt as comfortable as he is now, and he got back to Kinshasa. So, big congrats to him. He's found a home in Africa. I would also want to add on that thing about diaspora. There is a country called the Capo Verde, or Cape Verde, like Ugandans love to call it. They also qualified, and previously, because they've qualified, I think, last September. But they've only played, I think, one player who was born in Cabo Verde, born on one of those islands. I think Cabo Verde is a country made up of 10 islands. The total sum is 10 islands. It emphasizes something, and I've written about this for the Daily Monitor before. I think I wrote that story in September, whose title was The Age-Old Diaspora Question. And I've always felt that there's an injustice on countries like ours. Ugandans started leaving this country in the 70s, but sport has not benefited from that, because we must have a big diaspora community, which we could also use to, I think, to elevate to another level. Reminds me that also the FIFA president, Moses Mago, part of that budget that was heavily debated, the 72 billion a year, had 8 billion allocated to finding and facilitating players in the diaspora to come and play for Uganda. And there's many of them. Kavumama Queen at Chelsea, Divine Mukasa, who is a Man City player on loan at Leicester. And every time you're watching something, you'll find a name, Okello or somewhere. And maybe this is a further reminder of what we should do, because we may not have the resources here to develop players and get them their full potential, but people have developed them, and we could use those, and they could elevate our country to a certain level that we haven't been. So it's something that we cannot ignore. And wow, DRC, can't wait to see that Lingala in the stand once the World Cup starts in June.
Now we've talked about success. Let's talk about a horror, which is Italy. Now, let me read this. I got this from the BBC. Since Italy's last appearance in a World Cup knockout game when they beat France to lift the trophy in 2006, this is what has happened in the world we're in today. Water has been discovered on Mars, Leicester City won the Premier League, the iPhone was created, and Spain star Lamine Yamal, who finished runner-up in last year's Ballon d'Or, was not even born.
It's been that long.
And that bad. The Italians are furious.
It's taken
It's
taken Americans, what, 60 years to try and get to the moon again?
I know.
Yeah,
They're going this week, or they have gone?
They've gone back. But this time they're not even going to land on the moon. They are going to circle it. Yeah?
But people say, did they actually land the first time? How could it take 60 years?
Neil Armstrong did.
Anyway. Let's go to Italy and I don't know what this is.
You cannot make any kind of excuse for the kind of decline that Italian football has suffered, because now they are going to be missing a third World Cup in a row. They missed 2014, they missed 2018, They missed 2018, 2022, and now 2026. And the one they are mentioning, the one in 2006.
They were runners up.
They went back in 2010, but in there they've won the Euros.
Yeah.
They won the Euro 2020, beating England in that final. That penalty by Jorginho, eventually sealing the title for the Italians. But clearly the Azzurris have fallen on very hard times. Part of them, I think, it's financial. The league is no longer performing well. I was trying to understand, because something as drastic as this cannot be a one-off event where you concede a goal and then are not able to knock out Bosnia and Herzegovina. Because if you explain the game, the Italians took the lead, then had a man sent off, Andrea Bastoni sent off, then conceded an equalizer, defended with their nails, but eventually the game went to a shootout where the Italians were very terrible at the kicks and lost 4-1. But you cannot explain events as tragic as this in just the 90 minutes or the 2 hours for which the game was played. The challenges are deeper. I think the Italian teams have fallen off where Europe has gone. Reminds me of a statement that Joseph Cabletta has always made, that the closest you can come to Africa in Europe is Italy. And when he says it very cheekily. But
third world.
Yeah, the closest you can come to Africa in Europe is Italy. Yeah, because of, I think, the way they live and how you can circumvent processes that many European countries or first world countries may not, but Africa will do. But part of it is, for me, is down to the decline of their clubs. They no longer have the resources. They invested heavily in attracting the best talent in the late 90s and early 2000s. When you think about all the best players in that era, most of them or all of them played in Italy. Right from Ronaldo da Lima, for instance, and all these other strikers that they had in that league, and their own players, the Cannavaros and the Nemostars. And in that era, when they had all these players coming through and invested in the academies, they stopped investing in the academies. So they do not have a lot of great talent coming through. So after that golden generation that the Italian Football Federation and clubs invested in, from the 90s again, Ligue Buffo and all, when they walked away, there was no one to replace them.
The political scene, I remember Silvio Berlusconi.
Berlusconi too?
Yes, he had shares.
Milan.
Yeah.
Majority shareholder of Milan. The man who is famous
Former
for signing...
Prime Minister.
The man who is famous for signing Marco van Basten in 1988 when they met at a beach during the summer holidays. And he told him, "You're going to sign," without contacting his agent. And eventually Marco van Basten signed and brought an era at Milan that was that successful. So part of it, the problem also includes people like Berlusconi. Their investment in some of these foreign stars took away the investment they would have made in the academies and their players coming through. So when that golden era eventually walks away, the one that won the World Cup in 2006, Del Piero, Totti, De Rossi, Cannavaro, the others, Fabio Grosso, Zambrotta, Gianluigi Buffon, when that generation walks away, Italy were knocked out in the group stages in 2010 and in 2014. Then the guys who have taken over have not been as good. The clubs are struggling. You could tell from the Champions League when Atalanta made it through. I've also come to understand that the nature of their stadium is so old school. Remember, in Italy, unlike in many other countries, the stadiums were owned by the city authorities or by the government. Say for example, the Olympic Stadium in Rome, which is used by Lazio and Roma, is entirely owned by the KCC of Rome. So they do not generate the kind of revenue like they would if they owned their stadium. So you found that only a few teams like Juventus are the ones who have moved on and now built their own stadium. Then the TV revenue is a lot less.
Yeah.
So they haven't commercialized the game as well as other countries. And now that is also seen in the performance of the national team. So it's a multifaceted challenge that Italian football faces at present. And it's not enough just to say they are not going to the third World Cup in a row. It's also sufficient maybe to say we do not know when Italy will return to the World Cup. Because it's a country we are talking about that belongs in the annals of history, belongs with
Brazil.
only Brazil and Germany.
Yeah.
The other countries cannot compare, not even France.
Yeah.
Because of the titles they've won, they are 4-time world champions, but they've really fallen on hard times. If hard was misspelled, it reads Italy.
Okay, any other newsworthy, qualifiers that you'd like to mention?
The qualifiers are now concluded in their entirety. We have 48 teams that have made it there. I think this week was largely about the playoffs. Your country, Iraq, are through. They knocked out Bolivia in that playoff, so it will be good to see the Iraqis at the World Cup. Also, there is a story about Victor Gyökeres and Sweden. Most of the things that Arsenal fans think he doesn't do for them, he does for the Swedes. You find the number of goals they've scored, they are sometimes obscene. For Sweden, I think he scored from 16 of his last 20 shots for the national team, and he got them through to the World Cup. And the Swedes have been a very terrible team. If you read about how poor they were in qualifying, I think they drew only 2 games and lost the others, but they got through. To call it a ventilator is a bit respectful. I think they got through the ceiling because they did not deserve to be here, but they eventually got through. So Victor Gyökeres led his team to the World Cup in the absence of Alexander Isak. The other storyline has got to be the Czech Republic. When you look back at the breakup of the Soviet Union, you look back and remember a country called Czechoslovakia. They come into Euro 96, and on their first attempt, they make it to the final. Lost that final, I think, to Germany. That Euro 96 that was hosted by England. They lost in a penalty shootout because the game went into extra time. That generation that had the famous Manchester United winger, Karel Poborský. Thereafter, the Czech Republic, I think, produced some very excellent players, underlined by the quality of Pavel Nedved, who played at Juventus. They were never the same team thereafter, after that generation of Nedved, but now they are back. They are back at the World Cup, which should be a heartwarming story. Some of these countries are very tiny. Yeah, when you look at their population and compare with, say, a country like ours, we are almost too privileged.
I know.
In terms of fertility rates, that we should be able to put together 11 good players, but sometimes we do not, even with our privileges, in terms of the number of people that our countries do have. So that is one of the other storylines. The Czech Republic are also through to that World Cup. We already mentioned Bosnia and Herzegovina.
Yeah. We
largely mentioned what Italy do not have. But Bosnia too, one of those the former Soviet republics. Then there is Turkey. They are also back at this stage. I think they brought us a lot of joy or sadness in 2002 in that World Cup where they knocked out Senegal and were narrowly beaten by Brazil after Rivaldo feigning an injury when he was hit by the ball on the head. So that's another one. Then there's a country called Curacao. I think the smallest country ever to qualify for the World Cup. Also another country of islands, but somewhere in the CONCACAF region. Then perhaps finally, you think about teams like Croatia. They're also into that tournament. And then there is debutants like Uzbekistan. We haven't seen Uzbekistan at this stage. The first thing, normally when I see some of these countries, and I've learned some of these countries through watching sport, I'd never cared about whether this football played in Uzbekistan until a story broke of Rivaldo playing there for a team called Bunyodko. Yeah? Many years ago, the great Brazilian number 10 signed for a team owned by the richest man in Uzbekistan. Then I was thinking, okay, what is Rivaldo going to do? Then I answered myself very quickly, there is money to be made. That's the first time I heard of Uzbekistan. Now they are into the World Cup too. So it's 48 teams. It should be a logistical nightmare for any other country, but this is America we're talking about. Very big, heavily resourced, with a with a very high marginal propensity to consume because people have the money.
And they could even have held all the games in America if they wanted.
If they wanted,
but I think,
they chose to share with
Canada
Mexico and Canada. So the World Cup will be in 16 cities in all, and will be starting on June 11th.
Now, another World Cup title. I don't know what's wrong with Africans sometimes making headlines for the wrong reasons. So Ghana, the Ghana Football Federation, lost confidence in their coach. Ghana has been poor, yes, but they did make it to the World Cup, shockingly. I'm sure we could have talked about it over a year ago, how they managed to sneak in. But is this a good move to, I mean, you've just said June, we are beginning World Cup, and you're sacking a coach.
They actually sacked their coach 72 days to the start of their first game at the World Cup. Otto Addo. He's had a very, or Atto Odo, whatever, but there's an A and O at the start of each of those names. He has had a very uneasy relation with the Ghana FA for a very long period of time. This is a player who was born in Germany, played a lot of his football at the Borussia Dortmund, and eventually, when he retired, he also got a chance to play for Ghana. I think played for Ghana on 15 occasions, but never highly rated in Ghana because I did not feel that he was one of their own, having spent a lot of his time in Germany. So he's led them to the World Cup, but he's lost his job. While we might think of Ghana committing a mistake because the period is very small to the World Cup, I'm always thinking maybe it's not even the final coach to be sacked. There's going to be another one in there. The other month we heard of the Moroccan coach, Walid Regragui, another who, yes, he has Moroccan blood, but was born and raised in France. The one who led them to that semi-final at the World Cup in Qatar, deciding to part ways with the Moroccan FA, and now he's been linked with the Ghana job. So sometimes there are all these decisions, and maybe football would not be what it is without them. My feeling is he's not the last one. I think he's not the last one to lose his job, even if the World Cup is drawing ever closer. But Ghana in a race against time. They need to hire another coach very quickly. I've seen names thrown around. I've mentioned Regragui. I've seen the former Zambia coach, Havrena. The Frenchman also is in the conversation. I've also seen Kwesi Appiah, one who coached them before and felt disrespected and is currently coaching Sudan, where he's done considerably well. So it isn't ideal. It isn't ideal, never ideal, but he has lost, I think, 4 games in a row. And I saw someone post a joke that these days losing to Germany loses you your job because the last team to beat him in the friendly was Germany. Actually, Austria, yeah. Because they had lost to Germany previously. And they lost to, they were taken to the cleaners.
Margin, it was a big margin.
They conceded 4 against Austria, and that did not go down well with the Ghanaian FA. So Otto Addo is gone, and now they need to find a replacement very, very quickly. And hopefully they find one that is worth not only the money, but will be able to fix so many things. This is where I think they need to hire someone who is mightily aware of the workings and the mindset of Ghanaian players, because he doesn't have, maybe he has about 14 training sessions to be exact before they walk out for that first game at the World Cup. Okay, and that person will face, of course, an uphill task, but also like Zerbi, who has 7 games to save Spurs. How will he do? Why him, by the way? He has a lot of experience in Europe, from Marseille to Donetsk. To Shakhtar Donetsk, and he's also coached in England at Brighton and Hove Albion. And he left unceremoniously. I think it's not like Brighton were doing that poorly. But he had to go. I think he's also very ambitious. I think he fancies himself. He's known to be a student of Pep Guardiola, and I think he fancies himself to be one of the top coaches in the world. I was actually, in the weeks leading up to the sacking of Igor Tudor, the name was that was mentioned as favorite to take over from Tudor at Tottenham was Roberto Di Zerbi. I always felt he wouldn't take the job now, but would take the job at the end of the season, regardless of whether they'll be in the championship or in the top tier. So I was a bit stunned that he takes the job and he has 7 games to save their Premier League future. But also, reports indicate that his contract does not have an exit clause in case they get relegated. So he's committed to the long term, which is 5 years, which implies that...
Give him that time.
regardless, I think even if they get relegated, he's not going anywhere. For me, I thought that was a bit peculiar because jobs are not normally handed out that way. You would imagine that...
But maybe they're also realistic now. 7 games for you to perform miracles.
Yeah, and for me, they need to win 3 of those, and that maybe would also require beating one of the direct rivals. He doesn't have a lot of time in terms of saving them, but luckily because they do not play this weekend in the FA Cup, he has an entire week when the players return from the international break to work with the players and see what he can change. One of the things I did not like about the Zerbi in his latter time at Brighton, is how poor Brighton were defensively. But also the thing that you must like about him is that his teams play attacking football, regardless of the quality of the players that he has, and eventually that is bound to get them some goals. But I do not like the story I saw of the Tottenham Supporters Trust that has come out to oppose his appointment because he made comments in support of Mason Greenwood in the aftermath of that fallout with Manchester United and his ex-girlfriend, who...
They got back together.
Yeah, they got back together. She's had a child, but because there was a case of violence involving Mason Greenwood, the Zerbi thought it was too harsh. The manner in which he was treated and hounded out of United and ending up at Marseille. So there is that. So the club is still even divided. There's a time I felt under Thomas Frank that Tottenham Hotspur Stadium was one of the most toxic places in the world. It felt a bit like a dump site. There was so much negativity around the club from the fans that you felt it was going to affect the club eventually, and it has. So he's going to start on the wrong note. He must win some games, and even if he does, the supporters' trust will not back him because their issues with him are largely about the impurities of our societies, and many people in there do not think he should even have the job. But it's simple. Save Tottenham, then start to build again.
Okay. Let's talk about the FA Cup. I think clearly the biggest game is City versus Liverpool.
Yeah, Saturday, the early kickoff. Liverpool have Alexander Isak back. He should be rejoining the training squad on Thursday before the team plays on Saturday. I do not think he walks out immediately. I do not think...
Yeah.
I'd even be shocked if he makes the squad. It will be quite a statement from Arne Slot if he's able to make the matchday squad at the Etihad on Saturday. 2 teams that badly need some kind of trophy. Liverpool season
City already have, so...
Yeah, they need more. They need more. I think with their kind of squad, winning the Carabao and beating Arsenal is not sufficient. Maybe the FA Cup, if they go home with these 2, will be enough consolation for a season that has not panned out well for Pep Guardiola. I would imagine they will be the hungrier, and they are the home side, so they already have an advantage. It will be very interesting what kind of squad that Pep Guardiola puts out. We saw with the Carabao Cup, which is the last time we watched them on television, we felt he was missing some players. Maguire, he was not eligible. You imagine Ruben Diaz would have played on another day. Does James Trafford stay in goal for that one because he's been their cup goalkeeper? Do they give him another opportunity? After all, he's pushing for a place in that England 26-man squad for the World Cup. So I think the questions for Pep Guardiola are largely about selection. Does Ryan Cherki show up in the same kind of form he was against the Arsenal? Does he get the same number of minutes? Those are some of the questions. I think for Liverpool, they have no excuse at all. They've got to go there and compete and hopefully pick a positive result before they go into that Champions League game away at PSG in the week ahead. So you come to think of it that Liverpool have had a relatively terrible season, so they need to find some soft landing.
Yeah.
And further progress in the FA Cup would represent some kind of salvage mission for the side if they're able to make it past the quarterfinals and make it to the semi-final. They've been handed a very, very tough draw. But you do not pick who you play. You just have to go there and compete.
So Arsenal have it easy against Southampton?
Just like I think City, I'm very interested in seeing the squad that Mikel Arteta puts out. Ordinarily, when they are playing a lower division side, wouldn't hurt Arsenal too much if they play Kepa Arrizabalaga again and a few of the other squad players for this game at St. Mary's Stadium on the South Coast. But because of the manner in which that game in the Carabao Cup turned out, not many Arsenal fans will be very welcoming if the squad comes out an hour to kick off and Arrizabalaga is in goal. I think many of them would love to see their A-team. But that's only one way. Two, we're also going to get some early answers on whether many of these Arsenal players were actually injured. If they were, how much have they healed for that game on the South Coast? So it will be very interesting who Arsenal pick for the game. Of course, there are reports that Noni Madueke and Eberechi Eze will not be there because they have injuries. But many of the other guys, I think, who are withdrawn from the international engagement should be in that squad. And then thereafter, it's about Mikel Arteta. How many minutes does he need of them away at Southampton, in light that they have that Sporting Lisbon game in the week ahead in the Champions League. So it's a bit of a balancing act. But for me, the biggest decision is got to be who plays in goal. Does David Raya play that game? I've seen him also. He was in goal he got some minutes for Spain in international break. Or does Kepa Arrizabalaga get the trust of the manager and stays in goal for this particular one?
West Ham and Leeds?
The only Premier League clash in this quarterfinals. So should be an interesting one. There isn't much to pick between them. Both are in that relegation mire. So they are fighting to stay in the league. Leeds are, I think, a bit higher than West Ham. Should be anywhere above 5 points in the league. So maybe they have a lot more freedom in the cup competition than West Ham do. West Ham's fight is to stay in the league. Leeds should be able to get there if they pick a few more results over the next 2-3 weeks. So they should have a lot more freedom to experiment, but also maybe to even pick their A side for the FA Cup quarterfinal, and that should be very helpful to Leeds. But West Ham are one of the stories of English football and the FA Cup. If you go back to Bobby Moore in the 60s and all, or even closer, 20 years ago when they got to the FA Cup final against Liverpool, where they were only denied by the brilliance of Steven Gerrard to lock them out and deny them the trophy. You think, and playing at the London Stadium, that place should be bouncing with a chance of going to Wembley on the card. West Ham got to give it everything. And then the final one involves Chelsea and Port Vale.
I was wondering, isn't it almost obvious? Because Port Vale, which division are they in?
I wonder even what division they. I need to cross check that because they must be lower than the championship. But I've also felt Chelsea and Arsenal have been very, very lucky this season in terms of the draw that they've been given. So I think the fear for Chelsea, and this because of what happened in the previous round, they are playing in the third tier, which is League One, and currently they are bottom. Port Vale are bottom of the League One, and if the season ends the way it is, they will be relegated to League Two. I think the challenge for Liam Rosinia goes back to the previous round of FA Cup. Does it pick the right side to win the game inside the 90 minutes? Because the last time he tried that and had to bring on João Pedro very late in the game, and João Pedro by then was a bit like an ignition key. Hit once and it's gone. Because he was playing that well, Chelsea paid the price for playing a longer game they wouldn't have needed to. So for him, it's about choosing the right players for the job for this one. Because whichever squad Chelsea puts out and Liam Rosinia puts out, and in the situation where he is, where they have been struggling in the league, knocked out of Europe and embarrassed by PSG, what if they lost to Port Vale? Wouldn't Chelsea start to rethink their options with him?
I know.
Yeah.
Most definitely. Yeah, most definitely. And now as the seasons come to an end across Europe, let's talk a little bit about some of the European countries. We'll start with Italy. Inter have been on a losing streak and they're being chased
Or rather
by...
winless.
What did I say?
Losing. They've lost a game.
Okay,
they haven't
on
won
top
in
of the
3.
table.
Yeah.
Yes, okay, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
They haven't won in 3.
They haven't won in 3. And
Yeah.
Roma is hoping to play in Europe. I think they're 6th on the table.
Yeah.
So what happens this weekend?
Roma will give Inter Milan quite a test. Inter have not been in form. And one of the things I've noticed is that without Lautaro Martinez at the front, it's starting to show. The quality of Esposito and Marcus Thuram is not at the same level. And then you have Nico Barella, who has been struggling. So it hasn't helped Inter Milan in terms of where they want to go. So they need to find some kind of X factor. I think their best player for large periods this season has been the left wing back, Di Marco. Besides him, on the other side, someone who has been a key part of whatever they do, and that is the right winger, Dumfries, the right wing back, has not had the same kind of production that he's had in recent years. So they've been struggling in that area, and now the gap has closed. Because Napoli are on a fair match winning streak, the gap is now 5 points. For long periods, Inter Milan looked like they had won the league. But now the gap has closed, so it's a 5 points in there between them and Napoli. And then AC Milan and a further point adrift because it's 6 points for them off Inter Milan. But AC Milan were also flying and cut that gap from near double digits to single digits before they lost their previous round, before the international break. So I wait to see if Inter Milan drop further points. Napoli, who have had a lot of injuries this season, will close the gap further, which would become 2 or 3 points.
Milan, AC Milan.
They play AC Milan. If Napoli were to win that, then the gap is even smaller. But Napoli also have their own issues. Okay, Kevin De Bruyne has had a lot of injuries, but there's a story about Romelu Lukaku. He leaves the club. He has had a big hamstring problem this season, so he hasn't played as much football as he did when they won the league last season. So he leaves the club and goes to play for Belgium, gets there, and he's assessed and is told to go back to Naples. So he returns to Naples on Tuesday, but does not report to training because he was told by a club that if you're not playing for Belgium, then you should join the other players who have not gone out to play for their national teams. And Lukaku does not. And there was a very strong-worded statement from Napoli on Tuesday night warning Lukaku and actually vowing to suspend him from the squad and fine him. And that is the kind of thing you do not need to see. At this stage when they've worked their way back into the title race, in a season where they've suffered so many injuries.
What's his reason?
He hasn't given a reason to the club yet. So he's just behaved like all of us who escape work.
Life?
He's 32.
Yeah,
and he's been playing at the top level since he was 17.
You do that when you're 27, like the Rashfords. But now Rashford in Spain, I think he sobered up somehow. Speaking of Spain, tell us this weekend what to expect.
It's a huge game. The first of a trilogy of games between Atletico and Barcelona.
Yeah.
I think we are going to get tired of watching them because they play this weekend and then play in the Champions League in the next week. We'll talk about the Champions League game next week. This will be what? They've also played in the Kings Cup, the Copa del Rey. That game where Napoli ripped Barcelona apart and won 4-0 and lost the return leg by 3-0. So they've already played twice, and this is the third game. Then thereafter, they play another 2 over the next fortnight or so. So a lot of football between Atletico and Barcelona. I think by the time the games are done, we should be able to tell the blood groups of these players because we'll have seen them way too often that we should not be telling them by their faces. We should know a lot more about their abilities and what they do best and what they don't. Barcelona still have that 4-point lead over Real Madrid. Real Madrid will be playing against Mallorca. Mbappe is back, which is very, very important, and look very happy playing for France. And you've seen that video of him shooting the ball into a trash bin inside the dressing room. And he actually asked the NBA to give him a 10-day contract because the shot was that good from him. So it should be very interesting if Real Madrid get their points, and then Barcelona will be heavily challenged. And both sets of coaches, Hansi Flick and Diego Simeone, have probably to change one or two players to balance the squads for the weekend and then for the Champions League in the week ahead.
Okay, let's move to France now. PSG, most of their players were away for the international break. And we hope they return uninjured and they're able to play.
They have a 1-point lead at the top, which must feel very different. The manner in which they've dominated the French League in recent years is that they either win it by a huge margin or they lose it. The same way, for example, they lost a title to Lille a few years back. But now Stade have been, or Stade Lens, like someone would mention it, have given it quite a fight. So there's 1 point in there. Luckily, this week, PSG will play first against Toulouse, like a Ugandan would. So they have a chance to grow that margin. But the bigger story for me that has come out of France over the recent weeks is that PSG was supposed to play the team that is second, the team that is chasing them, in between the two games against Liverpool in the Champions League from next week. And PSG requested the French football authorities to postpone that game. The team they are playing against say they contest the decision. They do not want the game postponed, but the French football authorities eventually do. And that game that they're supposed to play between the first and second leg of Liverpool will not happen. So they get an entire week off to prepare for just Liverpool. So sometimes it's unfair, but sometimes I think about it and remember one of the comments Jose Mourinho made back in 2004 about how other leagues help their teams perform well in Europe, unlike England, because the Premier League makes it so hard for teams to get an extra break or an advantage that you could actually play on a Sunday and also walk out on Tuesday in Europe. Yet for most of the other leagues, if Bayern have a game in Europe in the following week, they'll play on Friday and then have an entire weekend off to prepare for a game that comes Tuesday or Wednesday. And happens in Portugal, in France, like I've mentioned, and in all other places. But France have even gone a notch higher. To imagine that Liverpool have to play Man City on Saturday, then play PSG on Tuesday, then after that, PSG will not play any other game until the next time they play Liverpool.
And Liverpool will have a Premier League game.
Liverpool have a Premier League game in that week, besides playing Man City. And PSG will have played on a Friday. Talk of a country showing its patriotism and wanting their team to do well. It's unfair on English teams, but they signed up for it. Every Premier League game costs broadcasters as much as £11 million. So when you're paid that much, there shouldn't be sympathy for filthy Richie boots.
No, but I was thinking now if you work and, they put a game on Friday. Yes, it was originally supposed to the games are in the evening. But let's say you have a night shift or anyway.
I remember I was talking to someone many years ago who lives in London. And it helps her to live in some of his countries. These countries that are that good. So he was working in a bank. And his father had lived and worked in Spain for some time. So his father was a paid-up member of Real Madrid. He told me of a story, and even when he really wanted to watch Real Madrid and had his father's membership of Real Madrid, he walks out of the bank at 5 p.m., gets onto a flight, and goes to Madrid, watch the game. I think it was Real Madrid against Olympique Lyonnais. Many years ago, I think Karim Benzema was at Lyon at the time before he joined Madrid, watched the game, and flew back to London and was in bed by midnight. of London time. So, 5 p.m., 6 p.m., 7 p.m., 8 p.m., 9 p.m., 10 p.m., 11 p.m., 12 p.m., 1 p.m., 2 p.m., 3 p.m., 4 p.m., 5 p.m., 6 p.m., 7 p.m., 8 p.m., 9 p.m., 10 p.m., 11 p.m., 12 p.m., 1 p.m., 2 p.m., 3 p.m., 4 p.m., 5 p.m., 6 p.m., 7 p.m., 8 p.m., 9 p.m., 10 p.m., 11 p.m., 12 p.m., 1 p.m., 2 p.m., 3 p.m., 4 p.m., 5 p.m., 6 p.m., 7 p.m., 8 p.m., 9 p.m., 10 p.m., 11 p.m., 12 p.m., 1 p.m., 2 p.m., 3 p.m., 4 p.m., 5 p.m., 6 p.m., 7 p.m., 8 p.m., 9 p.m
Just as
Where is the sympathy? So
you said some things you just look and admire. We can't even aspire to. I mean, just imagine from here to Ginger. If
Yeah.
you were to go to Ginger.
when I was younger, it used to take under 1 hour. Today it takes 4 hours.
I know.
Yeah,
Just to get to Mukono.
Yes.
And
Mukono
then
actually you could get to Ginger before you get to Mukono. That's how much traffic there is. There's a time I was having a conversation with Alvin Bagaya. Alvin Bagaya is part of the trustees of cricket and has also done a very good job with lawn tennis. So I was asking him about how hard it is for a Ugandan player to make it to the ATP tour in tennis. And he gave me just a basic scenario. The tournaments that get you points on the ATP tour circuit in Africa are in Tunisia and South Africa. To make one trip to either of those countries and hotel and everything, you need 12 million shillings. So he gave me an example of a player, let's say like Rafael Nadal. If he's trying to make ATP tour points, and they do these things in their teenage years, let's say from around 13 to about 16, 17, then they turn pro. Because all the tournaments on the ATP tour that get you points are centered in Europe, Nadal can walk out of his house and take the Eurostar, yeah, which is the metro, which would cost that person anywhere, say, 10 euros to get to a tournament in France and find a hotel or an Airbnb, which is cheap, play a tournament from Monday to Friday, Saturday, where the finals are normally played on Saturday, then get on another train on Sunday and go to another country and play another tournament Monday to Saturday and get in another country like that, because that's what they do at that stage. And part of it, you cannot even blame sport for not being able to develop a player to get to that level. Some of it is down to our economics and our infrastructure, which is entirely governments and these rubbish visas. For example, a visa to Gabon by 2017 was costing as much as $200. What am I going to steal from Gabon, really? Why do I even need to pay to go to Gabon? But now you see the advantage a European player has. Yeah? Walks out of their house, get onto a train for under 10 euros. They're in the next country. They don't need a visa. So some of our disadvantages, our lack of success, is on many other things.
Indeed. Well, let's continue on a happy note. As our happy boys, we talked intensively about this earlier in the week. They are playing Villa this week. So
there is a sound I have on my phone. I'm not going to play it, but it's very interesting. So there is a manager of Happy Boys. He gave an interview, I think, to one of the journalists who is working on a radio in that greater Mubende region. And he said they are preparing for Villa. So one of the things they've done to prepare for Villa, who will be visiting on Easter Monday, is that they've moved the players into a hotel for them to focus. But he emphasized that the players have unlimited Wi-Fi, unlimited access to the internet and television for them to enjoy this week as they prepare. And I'm thinking, you want the players to rest and be able to train to play Villa. And he's talking about providing
Wi-Fi.
television and Wi-Fi. And I was thinking, come on. Anyway, I hope Advantage Villa. It's only Advantage Villa because these teams belong to different layers of Ugandan football. Villa are 9-time Uganda Cup champions. They've won the league on 17 occasions. When you're playing a regional league side like Happy Boys from Kasanda, they should win the game easily. Then Happy Boys hand them an even extra advantage by connecting the players to Wi-Fi in a hotel with television. Really, let them enjoy it, and then eventually maybe they walk out and don't win the game. But before we get even to Monday, the first will be URA against KCCA at Nachivubo, or Ham Stadium, Nachivubo, as this generation maybe would call it. All the games actually at 3 p.m.
Neck
from
Vipers
Friday.
as well.
Neck Vipers on Saturday at 3 p.m. Then Kitara Express on Easter Sunday, also at 3 p.m. in Hoima. So those are the fixtures. We are looking to get the 4 semi-finalists, and the semi-finals will be played on a home and away basis. So there will be more football later on.
Okay. Thank you for that. Now, for this part, why should we care? And that's why people should watch Second Take with IDK, because you usually give us a backstory. You have so much rich history about so many things in Uganda.
There is one who sent me a message that the other program we did, and I spoke about Express and how the league started, because the question was about what was the exact question? Was about institutional clubs in the league. And perhaps the person must have thought that I was just going to say, let's have institutional clubs or not. Then I went to give a background of how we got here, and they had no idea.
From KK's grandfather.
Yeah, from Jolly Joe Chiwanuka. And they just picked out the side, like the things you said about how Express started. I went to my workplace and told guys about them. And now I'm a pro. I'm a pro, yeah. And I was like, I have no qualms with you. All good with me.
That's why you should watch Second Take with IDK for the story behind the story. So, Isma, this is something that happens a lot in Ugandan leagues. Why should we care about what is happening with the volleyball league? Nemostars versus Elion. And the Elion, what's all that about?
But by now we should have a champion. We could have had a champion. Remember, the finals for the men and women in the National Volleyball League were supposed to have started on Saturday,
but
the previous week. The men did not play, and that is that weekend of March 27, 28th. So there was one game for the women between VVC and KCCA. KCC won that first game, 3-0, and they are leading that series by 1-0. It's a best of 3 series. So if you win 2-0, if they walk out the next time and KCC win, then we have a champion. But the men's finals, which were supposed to start that weekend, did not, because Nemostars, who won on court and were supposed to be playing against Potes, used 2 ineligible players. One of them had played for Nemo and then moved to South Sudan. So when he returned, Elion filed a case that he's supposed to have obtained an international transfer certificate, which UVF do not have. Uganda Volleyball Federation do not have. So they banned Nemo out of the championship. Also, there's a player who was claimed by a club in Western Uganda, I think Mitomoso, attached to Bishop University Volleyball Club. So they claim that he's their player, but he has been playing for Nemo. So Nemostars are bundled out of that, and Elliot are supposed to advance to the finals. So what happens eventually is that Nemostars appealed the case, but I got to learn that they appealed the process, not the substance.
So there's some
They appealed that the process that UVF used to decide that Elion advances to the finals on the grounds that Nemostars had 2 players was wrong. That Nemostars were not informed and asked to file their defense. So they filed their defense, and that's why we haven't had the men's final start yet. But emphasizes, many times we have seen in Ugandan sport decisions made in the boardroom. They are not very palatable, because many of us, sport must be decided inside the 4 lines on the board. Anything else that is done inside the 4 walls does not really leave a very good taste in the mouth.
Are you saying Nemostars shouldn't have been punished or shouldn't have been called out for what they did?
I think for every decision, what does that say about the federation? Nemo could be punished, but to the guys who make the registration, how does a player even walk out? And the guys who conduct the championship, Uganda Volleyball Federation, and Nemostars use a player and they walk out and register. Yeah,
and you don't
raise a red flag before these guys play. So it does not, for me, make sense on all parties. Yes, Nemostars might have made a mistake, knowingly or unknowingly, but in the end, you cannot exonerate that we keep going through the same cycle with many federations where they conduct games and then later on come back and say, we made a mistake. The team that was beaten now has advanced, and the one that won is thrown out. Doesn't taste well for me.
Well, you'll keep on giving us more and more updates, I guess, as we get to know what happens. But that's it we had for you, and we wish you a very great Easter whenever you get to watch this. If it's after Easter, we hope you had a good Easter. And for those who are celebrating, do have yourselves a good Easter. We'll see you again next week.
Are you tired of the daily hustle and bustle, the endless traffic just to get your little one to a good school? GMS Snap Bingo offers a unique blend of academic excellence with a holistic child development in both nursery and primary. We provide a national curriculum with an international touch. Enroll your child today by visiting our campus along Trinity College, Bingo Road. GMS Snap Bingo, where every child's potential is a reality. Because we care.